Hello, welcome back to another pen talk. For those of you that saw my video on the Philadelphia Pen Show, you might recognize most of the pens here. I did go heavy on Franklin-Christoph at the show. As you saw from the intro to the video, this is going to be all about Franklin-Christoph. To sum it up, I can't say enough about how much I enjoyed meeting Scott and Don and Jim and all the Franklin-Christoph team that was at the show. They were one of the main sponsors, so they made it possible for that show to be supported and come off as well as it did. One of the things that I got into at the show was the people that I met up with on Friday night discussed how they were going to be first in line when the show opened for the early people at 8 a.m. on Saturday. And they were mainly looking at what I really hadn't been aware of. That Franklin-Christoph brings some one-offs, some unique pens, and a lot of pens which aren't available generally on their website. They bring to shows because they don't really have enough to put up on the website. And also you get one-offs and prototypes. So that had me excited, and I got engaged and I added significantly to my Franklin-Christoph collection, and I'm extremely pleased with all the pens. I've written with them a little bit, but not extensively, so I can give you some first impressions on them. I'm also going to talk a little bit about Franklin-Christoph in general and how they evolved as a company. I mentioned in my Philly pen video that, you know, Scott and Don put together a little seminar and talked about how the company developed and how it evolved, and that was excellent. You know, it wasn't until Scott and Don got together that they actually thought about making their own pens. This is a model 19 you may recognize from an earlier video. The first version of that was made in Germany. And then when Don got together with Scott, they made it domestically, and this is one of the ones that were made domestically. And this was also bought at the Philly Pen Show in 2015. So without further ado, let's dive deep into the first pen of this list, which is a Model 20. It has a clip, and it's in the antique glass finish, which apparently has been coined effectively Coke bottle, but that can't officially be acknowledged, as that would tend to have some copyright violations. One of the things that I learned at the pen show is how much engineering goes into making the Franklin-Christoph pens. I think the Model 20 is their current highlight of design. It has a slip-on cap, but they decided to do something a little bit different than anybody else has done before with a slip-on cap. It has a large contact surface between the cap and the section and barrel, and that makes it for a very firm setting of the cap. I've experimented with different ways of coming off with it, so I decided a little wiggle and a counterclockwise turn takes the cap off fairly easily. Hopefully you can appreciate the transparent quality of this acrylic resin that they used. All their pens are acrylic resin. I did not use this as an eyedropper, which is the most common thing. I probably will once I get more used to the pen and decide what ink I want to commit, because that's a lot of ink in there. The other thing that came across was how this top unscrews, and as part of their design, and they also discussed about how they designed the clip, and you know, have the little screw set in there to set the clip, and that clip works with various models of pens. So I never would have thought to unscrew that, but that's kind of a classic design. You know, Parker Duofolds did this, and a number of other companies. So what it does is the clip is kind of a sensitive area of a pen. So if it gets bent out of shape, it's going to be easy to replace with this type of a design, and it's still very, very functional, as you can see. In the beginning, I was interested with these threads here in the middle, but after a while I realized they're part of the design statement and also part of the way the pen is made. The pen posts very nicely, and I think this may be my world's best pen after a while. The section is great. I mean, you can hold it any place you want along the section, and it works fine. So that's the clip version. You don't need much pressure to post it. This is just a clipless version. Again, nothing unique here. I did get a different nib in each of my Franklin-Christophs. It's just great because they do, I think, really subtle design, which is one of their trademarks, and I appreciate that and enjoy it. They really do, from an engineering, manufacturing, construction, all of those attributes, I think, show out quite well in the pens that they produce. I fell in love with this one. I know the clear ones are real popular, but I just love this green color. It's just a beautiful green. It has some translucencies to it. I have a number of really, I would call, exotic over-the-top acrylics. The Edison 76 I have is one of those. My Nuponzic is one of those. So this is really an understated but very beautifully made pen, which I just like I said, fell in love with. Again, it's a Model 20, and as you can see, the translucency and the cap comes across in this nice sunlight. All the features that Franklin-Christoph has for the rest of their pens are exemplified in this. So that was why I ended up with the emerald one. Now we're going to go into one which probably not many people have even seen or heard of. This is a Model 40 Panther. According to Scott, this was made for a birthday celebration of a family member, and he thinks there's only 2 or 3 out into the public. These are Tennessee colors in the bands here on the cap. The Model 40 is delineated because it has an extra long cap. As you can see, the dimensions here, the cap is more than 50% of the length of the pen. I think this is a great design. It's an unscrew cap, very common with the threads at the bottom, but a very, very long section. Again, very easy pen to hold. You can use it unposted, and of course it posts very, very deeply and makes a excellent pen posted. The weight and balance are not affected either posted or unposted. This is just another example. This is that smoke acrylic. And as you see, there's what I thought was a breather hole, but Scott mentioned he considered that a flaw in the pen, so I was able to get this at almost half price, so that was beautiful. I appreciate how they work with us pen aficionados and pen people. Hopefully the sunlight is bringing out the chatoyancy in this acrylic. So this is smoke acrylic, which Scott says is difficult to work with, and that's also the acrylic that I have in my Model 19. When you get a pen from Franklin-Christoph, each of the nibs are individually adjusted, and when you go to a show, you'll watch Jim do that in person. And this also describes the nib. You get these with any of the non-steel nibs. You'll get a little pamphlet, a little certificate. And of course, everything comes with your Franklin-Christoph guarantee, which is excellent. And from talking to Scott and Don and other people, they really are good at making certain that all their customers are very happy with their purchases. They're also, I think, the packaging is excellent. You get a nice leather pouch. Franklin-Christoph is known for their high-quality leather goods, and it comes in a simple white box. Very functional packaging. You know, the white box protects it from shipping, gives a way of, packing a box well, and this nice leather pouch keeps the pen protected. I got 3 inks, and I just put these in the background just so you could see. Again, the understated design is exemplified throughout their line. And this is a special edition ink that they did for the Philadelphia Pen Show called Franklin Green. I haven't inked up anything yet with this. I think it's a little bit of a dark green from what I saw from the samples, but as we know, ink is only the same as when you actually put it into a pen and put it to paper, so there's lots of changes. I wanted to just show this. Some of you may recognize this as a feeler gauge, which used to be quite common when you used to have to set points and plugs in automobiles and other mechanical vehicles. But I saw Jim and also Mark, the Nibmeister, using stainless steel shims in adjusting nibs. And I said, that's great. Where'd you get those? And they go, you go to Pep Boys and you get one of these feeler gauges, you take it apart, and then you have these incredible sets of shims. And what's nice is you can use this to spread the tines, and obviously because the shins come in so many different thicknesses, you can easily adjust the tines. Stainless steel is probably a little bit harder than the gold and the nibs, so you just have to be a little bit more careful than you would with a brass shim, which is primarily used just for cleaning. So we're going to transition now to a writing sample, because like I said, I have different nibs in all of these Franklin-Christophs, and let's take a look and see how they work on paper. Rather than me do measurements of the two pens in this video, the Model 20 and the Model 40, here are some screenshots from the Franklin-Christoph website. I'll put a link in the description of the video, so those of you that want to visit the site, I encourage you to do so. But here are their measurements for the Model 20 Marietta. And here they are for the Model 40 Panther. One of the things that I also wanted to talk about a little bit more detail is, again, the level of quality of their build and how they put the pens together. I mentioned to you that this piece unscrews, and when it screws together, it lines up perfectly with the clip. That takes a lot of engineering, being able to get those threads just right over and over again. So it's one of the things that both Scott and Don were very happy with, and I think as a user of their pens, I'm also very happy too. Rather than try to remember the inks and nibs and everything else during a live video, here's what we're going to be looking at in this short writing sample. I've experimented a number of different ways of trying to do writing samples in front of the camera, so we're going to try this one. Change in view. So the first one up is the Model 20. This is the 1.1 steel stub. And one of the things that I've noticed about all the Franklin-Christophs is all the nibs are incredibly smooth. Steel, 14K, 18K, they're all excellent writing experiences. This nib glides across the paper, and because it's a stub, you get a nice crisp line on the horizontals, and you can get some variation on the verticals. You can squeeze a minor amount of variation out of it, as you can see, but this is a nicely done stub. All the feeds, Franklin-Christoph feeds, work well. The nib and feed are one unit. They can unscrew and screw. So all of my Franklin-Christophs have a number 6 nib, so they're all interchangeable. So again, another nib I just really like, and I have other nibs. I have a 1.5 TWSBI, and I like the 1.1 better because it's something you could use as an everyday writer. And because it's a stub, it's going to get some natural line variation. And hopefully you can hear that, how smooth the nib is. Now we're going to go to the Model 20 with the clip on it. This one also has a steel nib, but this one is a fine steel nib. One of the things with the Model 20s is at the inside here, as you can see, it's kind of hollow, and ink will collect there when you fill it. Doesn't seem to be a major problem. I'm certain in the design of the pen, based on where the section was in the nib, that was part of their design. So let's take a look at this. Again, you can hear it sounds pretty much the same, which is nice for an extra fine to still have that smooth quality. Being just an extra fine, you're not going to get any line variations. This is a stiff, fine nib, but most of the time what you want to do with a nib like this is just everyday writing where you have a consistent line. And as you can see, the much color different ink. So now we're going to take a look at the emerald one, which is filled with emerald 357. And this nib is a metallic broad 14 karat. I don't think they had this nib when I was at the Philly show a year ago. Hopefully you can hear this is has a little bit more feedback, which is what you would expect. And I'm sorry, there's a little bit of skipping, which I think is because these have been sitting in the sun. There's probably a little bit of an ink flow. This is also much sharper because it is an italic than a stub. So it's much more sensitive to angle. But as you can see, you can get some fairly decent, and this thing does spread out, which is kind of nice. I mean, that's a pretty good variation for a modern nib. It does catch on the paper. If you don't treat this nib right, it is very sensitive to the angle. There is a very, very fine sweet spot on it. But once you get used to using this, you can really get some nice line variations just in normal writing. So let's take a close-up look at that, and again, you know, it's great to be able to have these different type of nibs to experiment with and play with. So now we're going to go to the Model 40 Panther. I would post this because it's just perfect when it's posted. And I am amazed to admit that this is the best nib of the lot from my viewpoint. This is extremely smooth, and I think you can hear that. It just glides across the paper, lays down a beautiful patch of ink. And again, I apologize with the sun and the angle in front of the camera. That makes it a little bit more difficult to write, but I think it gives you a better view. And this has a little bit of line variation, but not significant. And this nib was not designed to do that, but it just is a pleasure to use. And I haven't done this with the other nibs, but this, I think all these nibs lay down a decent patch of ink, as you can see. So now we're going to look at a nib that I had gotten before with my Model 19. And if you want a more in-depth review of the Model 19, you can look at my review from last year. This is also a pen that I enjoy posting. So this has a little bit of a different nib on it. This is an 18 karat medium oblique ground by Massey Amo. Hopefully you can get to see that grind there. I've had Mike grind a delta of Mayan into a left oblique, which is a little bit more of an angle to it. And this is an 18 karat metallic medium. Very, very smooth when you're in the sweet spot. As you can see, you can get some decent line variation out of this. This is an ink that I got at the show. The Nord Blue, a very dark blue, kind of a gray, dark gray blue. It's an interesting ink, something you could use every day. So that's it for the Franklin-Christoph nibs. Hopefully you've enjoyed this little foray into pens and nibs and etc. from I would say one of the best U.S. manufacturers, along with Edison and a few others, considering they do make a number of pens, so they're not really mostly one-offs. So we're going to flip over, use my favorite nib, my 90-gram Clairefontaine. We're going to use the other side. So thank you for viewing. I hope you had an excellent writing experience in your own way. Hopefully you enjoyed this little look at an American manufacturer and some of the different products that they make, and may someday you own the pens that you would like to own. Bye.